Hello and welcome to today's webinar, how integrating MachineMax into your workflow can improve your business. My name is Eoghan Simpson and I'm the construction executive here at MachineMax. The webinar today is going to be split into 4 bite-sized sections. So first we're going to look at the challenges our industry faces. Next we'll look at why it's a challenge and the implications. For the third section, we'll run through the solution and the benefits. And then finally, to finish the presentation, we'll look at some case studies on how organizations are integrating MachineMax into their workflow to increase productivity while reducing costs and emissions. So to begin with, let's take a look at the impact our industry has on sustainability. As you may know, 25% of global emissions comes from construction. Bringing this back to the UK, and according to the Supply Chain Sustainability School, plant and machinery, or non-road mobile machinery, is estimated to emit 10 million tonnes of CO2 per year. This accounts for about 2% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. What's interesting about this is that 81%, so 8.1 million tonnes of CO2 is directly attributed to plant and machinery over 3 tonnes. Digging a little deeper, here at MachineMax we've been conducting some research across a broad set of data that we have on our platform. Here we're looking at statistics across 1 month and 17,000 machines working in the UK. Shockingly, the average utilisation, so the time the machine is switched on, is only 4.5 hours per day. Even more alarmingly, the machine is sat idling for 45% of that time. So out of the 4.5 hours the machine is on, it's idling for 2 hours. This impact of the machines being switched on is that over 3,000 tonnes of CO2 is being emitted, and over 1.2 million litres of fuel is being burnt in this 1 month. We then look at a HS2 project with a data set of 58 machines over 1 month. Again, we see the average utilisation is very low, this time at only 4 hours per day. We then go on in a bit more detail and look at idling and the impact. As you can see, in this 1 month, over the 58 underutilised machines, there were over 1,700 hours of idling. The carbon emissions just from idling were 17 tonnes, which is the equivalent of over 200 tonnes per year. Looking at fuel, around 6,800 litres were burnt, just from idling. Then, putting a cost on this, idling contributed to over £13,500 of the fuel bill in this 1 month. Now, some of this is going to be productive idling, where the operator cannot switch off the engine. But for the most part, it will be the unproductive kind, which is totally unnecessary and where savings can be added straight to your bottom line. So why is it a challenge? Why are machines being underutilised and idling so much? Ultimately, it comes down to the fragmentation of data. We know that organisations are working in lots of different locations. In those locations, they're doing lots of different projects. And on those projects, they'll be working for lots of different clients, asking them to report in different ways. The machines themselves mightn't all be owned, so some may come from a subcontractor and others directly from a plant hire company. Those machines will all be different makes and models, and they'll all come with different connectivity, whether it's the latest and greatest autonomous machine or the older, more basic machine. So, as you probably picked up on, there's a common theme across all of these, which is the term different. And with it being different, it's very difficult to analyse performance in a simple and easy way. Data is locked away in many different silos and not easily accessible to people on site who can make a difference. And so what are the implications of this? Well, do we have the right number of machines on site? If we've two of the same machine on site, both being underutilized, could we off-hire one? Or if a machine hasn't been used for a couple of days, do we really need it? A big initiative in our industry is to be net zero. I'm sure most of you here today will have targets, be it 2025, 2030 or 2050. The question is, how are you going to reach this target and track progress if you don't have a baseline or even a way of monitoring your entire fleet? Another point to consider is how you're providing the right reports to the right people at the right time. It's all well and good retrospectively looking at a project and saying, oh well, we could have done it better. In this day and age, the data needs to be available in real time so that it can be actioned in real time. As we saw on the earlier slides, there's a significant cost to running plant and machinery. And we had a great example recently where a contractor was hiring in operated plant. They were paying about £30 an hour for the operator and the same again for the machine. So it was about £2,500 per week. When they deployed MachineMax, they noticed this machine was only being utilised for 50% of the time that week. And then of that time, it was idling for 45%. When we looked into the cost, idling alone was costing them over £560, and that's before they even paid for fuel. So what's the solution? Here at MachineMax, we recognise the challenge and implications, so we provide a single platform view of all your machine data. We're able to connect any piece of equipment, whether it be via the manufacturer platform, an API, a sensor, or a mix. We then aggregate and standardise the data, surfacing it on the platform for anyone to access in real time. Here are some examples of the manufacturer platforms we've pulled data from previously. So the typical data we get here is very high level and just gives a snapshot of the active time, idling time and fuel. For the most part, it isn't in real time either. What's also been very interesting is the different algorithms and definitions that manufacturers have. So when it comes to idling, an example is Kobelco, for instance, who will count idling after 6 minutes has passed, whereas someone like Bell will count idling when the engine revs per minute are between 6 and 800. And this is where the data standardization becomes really important. It ensures you have a true representation of your entire fleet. So as well as pulling data from the manufacturer platforms, we can also enhance it with one of our sensors. So they've been designed to be non-invasive, which means they're really easy to install or refit when plant moves off-site. The most popular is our Max tracker, which is wired off the machine's battery, and by doing so provides a live feed of the machine. This gives you a detailed analysis of machine activity to know where it is and what it's doing. It shows the routes that have been taken and helps identify bottlenecks. So if too much idling is taking place in an area, such as loading or dumping, or where breaks are being taken and the machine is left running. Again, it goes back to the point of having data to hand to be able to do something about it, effective immediately. The next most popular sensor is our Max Active, which runs off its own battery and provides intermittent updates on activity. We're seeing these used more and more on things like generators and light towers, where you don't necessarily need the data immediately, but you want to be able to report on usage. So by aggregating all of this data, it begins to build a picture of operations across your entire fleet and sites. The dashboards will provide you with a high-level overview, and then you also have the ability to drill down to site or machine level. Here you can see the different capture points, and then we're also showing things like locations and timelines of activity. We had someone say recently, it's like the Strava for plant and machinery. So as well as getting visibility, We can also monitor productivity and help with cost allocation. Functionalities such as routes provide an insight into the journeys a piece of machinery takes around site. You can see how far a machine travels each day, the number of trips taken, how long they take, and what time they take place. So it begins to raise questions such as, are the most efficient routes being taken around site? Or could machines be parked elsewhere or different routes be taken to reduce the distance and fuel? Functionalities such as geofences can be used to allocate specific areas of a site, such as loading areas or dumping areas, or even areas a machine shouldn't access. It can then tell you if a machine is spending too long within a specific area or if it's breached a certain area. So, for example, dump trucks are spending too long in the loading area. Could that indicate that another excavator may be required? We're then also seeing geofences being used with costing plant movement. If we've different geofences all attributed to different cost codes, well then we know how long machines have spent in a given area, and we know what cost code to allocate that to. So what's the impact and the benefit of MachineMax? As we've touched on a couple of times today, there's both a fuel and carbon saving. For those who are renting machines, there's a rental reduction. So if the machine is underutilized, well, it can be off-hired. For those who own machines, it's around lengthening the time between services and increasing the residual value, because when the machine is idling, the clock is still ticking. There's then improving operator behaviour. So with having the data to hand, it's much easier to educate operators. Productivity and utilisation. So do we have the best machines for the task, and are we being as efficient as possible? And then finally, there's the improved procurement decisions. So if you're buying machines, is one manufacturer more efficient than another? Or for future projects, do we need as many machines? Or how much fuel are we going to need? So these impacts and benefits are now being seen by many organisations across the world. Here at MachineMax, we're managing over £250 million worth of assets for organisations I'm sure will be familiar to a lot of you. Next up, we've got some case studies on organisations using MachineMax. So firstly, we have Cemex. So Cemex are aiming to reduce fuel usage by 40% by 2030. They realise that 75% of their carbon footprint comes from diesel usage in mobile plant. And their issue was that they found it difficult to compare performance across all of the different OEMs and all the older machines they had. So they chose MachineMax to consolidate this and then enhance the data with our sensors. As you can see, for one single machine, they saved over £20,000 on fuel usage and maintenance. Next up, we've got Murphy. So Murphy are aiming to reduce emissions by 50% over the next 5 years. Similar story, they found that equipment manufacturers all had their own portals and they needed to combine all the data together. By choosing MachineMax, they now have a better understanding of the fleet's environmental impact, and that's helping them to move toward net zero by 2030. The data has also allowed them to bring in alternative fuel and plant and reduce reliance on diesel. So an interesting fact, 95% of telehandlers on the MachineMax portal could go electric based on their utilisation. As you can see here on the HS2 Euston project, Murphy were able to reduce carbon emissions by 10%, and that was directly attributed to MachineMax. Finally, we have Imerys. So Imerys had a challenge of gaining full visibility of their fleet. So previously they were getting telemetry data on a daily or weekly basis, which became very difficult to action. So the solution was to use live machine data to highlight inefficiencies. These inefficiencies were highlighted as and when they're happening so that they could be actioned immediately. And the metrics providing the biggest initial impact include include utilization, idling time, and location. So here you can see they were able to reduce their fuel usage by 25% and idling by between 3 and 10% across their sites. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks for your time today. Hopefully you found the content valuable and subject interesting. As you can see, MachineMax is a valuable tool for monitoring your entire fleet to reduce costs, increase productivity, and meet net zero objectives. If you have a project in mind that you'd be interested in using on, please let us know. But for now, thanks again and all the best.